So as mentioned, I am Krista Seiden. I'm the analytics advocate for Google. I'm also a product manager for Google Analytics. So it's a pretty cool dual role because I get to be out in market, speaking and teaching and training and hearing customer feedback and what's going right and what's going wrong. And I get to bring that back to the team and help build a better product. I'm also highly involved in the analytics industry. I've been in this space for about a decade at companies like Adobe, the Apollo Group, and Google. Huge advocate for women in analytics. If you want to learn more, talk to me after. And please don't call me on my cell phone, but if you want to reach me, you can get me on Twitter or at my blog, kristaseiden.com. All right. So today we're talking about analytics to drive optimization. But first, we need to understand what is actually driving down conversion. So there's a few things. First, user experience. Are your sites slow loading? Do they have content that's misorganized or hard to find for your users? Second, are you not personalizing? Is the content on your site, does it speak to the users who are actually coming there? Third, are your web analytics actionable? Do you have the right data in place to be able to make the decisions you need to make to actually optimize your website? And finally, do you have the development resources that you need in order to do that? Oftentimes I hear in companies, and I've been in this place too, that you just don't have enough development resources to do your analytics updates and your testing and your SEO and everything else you want to do this quarter, and so you have to pick one or two. And that can be a really tough place. So today we're going to focus mostly on numbers 2 and 3, the analytics that you need to drive optimization and personalization. So 94% of marketers do agree that their future success is going to be based on personalization. And for those who are already doing it, they're actually seeing a 19% uplift in sales. Even the Harvard Business Review agrees. And they say not to know your customers, not to understand their unmet needs, and not to invest in resources based on those needs is to cede one of your most important assets to potential challengers. So this is really, really important to both understand and get right for your future success. So I've created an optimization framework. We're going to start with analysis. We're going to spend a good amount of time today talking about analysis and what you need to understand about your websites to really drive that optimization. Then we go into hypothesis. What do we need to, or how do we take this analysis and make assumptions about what might work? Then we're going to test it. And finally, we're going to talk about personalization. So let's start with analysis. I have a few tips for you in this area. So our first tip is campaign tagging to distinguish our different variations. So as marketers, we send a lot of people to our websites. We bring in a lot of traffic from all sorts of mediums, from social media and email and ads, and you name it, they're coming from there to your website. We want to make sure that we understand how this traffic is coming, which ones are performing best for us, so that we can then optimize on that. So we're going to use campaign tagging. In Google Analytics, this is called UTM tagging. In some other platforms, it's called other things, but it's all a similar idea. So the first is for email testing. If you're testing headlines in an email, you're testing those call to action buttons, and you want to make sure that you understand which actual variation of email is driving the most conversion on your website, you're going to want to make sure that you're properly tagging it with your campaign tagging. Ad testing. So if you're using AdWords or DoubleClick, hopefully you're also using auto tagging so that you're getting that data coming in without having to do much. You can also do something called UTM overrides. This means that you can actually add UTM parameters to that auto-tagged URL in order to get more information. One of my favorite things to do with ad testing is to use the UTM content field to grab the ad headline. That way, when I'm actually analyzing those ads in my analytics tool, I can see the actual headline used. It brings a lot more context to the data that I'm analyzing in terms of which headline was driving the highest conversion. And finally, social media. So this is a big one. If you are doing a lot of social media, which I'm assuming many of you are, you want to make sure that each of your social media posts is individually tagged with the proper campaign tagging, which means that each post gets its own short URL. Don't reuse that short URL on multiple different networks because you will have no idea which network drove the highest conversion. So for example, you can see here, this is my personal blog. I blog a lot about analytics and optimization. And here I'm tracking different posts that I put out on different social networks. So I've got stuff on Twitter and on Google+. And in the content field, the UTM content field, I've added it as a secondary dimension in my table in Google Analytics. I've used the headline of the blog article that I've written to fill that in. That way I can see which article is actually driving the most traffic. And once I do this for a while and I collect enough data, I can start to see something really interesting here. What I see is that when I blog about content for Google Tag Manager, I actually get a lot more traffic coming from Google+ than I do from Twitter. But when I blog about pretty much anything else, I get more traffic from Twitter. So digging in here a little bit more, I figured out that there's actually a very large Google Tag Manager community on Google+. Who knew anyone actually uses Google+ anymore? But they do, and this community is actually very, very active, and so when I blog about Google Tag Manager, people are sharing it there. They're coming from Google+ to my blog. And that helps me to create a content strategy around how I'm going to release content when I blog about different tactics. OK, our next tip is implementation to track conversion. For this, we're going to talk a little bit about tag management and the data layer. Raise your hand if you're familiar with Google Tag Manager. Great. OK, if you're not, it's a tag management system. It helps you launch tags on your site, analytics tags, marketing tags, different things. And there's a concept called the data layer, which is an extra piece of code on your site. You can inject things into it, and you can collect more information through there. So let's walk through an example of this. I'm at home in San Francisco, and I'm getting hungry for some Italian food. So I Google Postmates Italian food SF. Postmates is a food delivery company in San Francisco. My fiance happens to work for them, so if I used any other food delivery company, I might be exiled from the apartment. So that first one, Tommaso's Italian restaurant, it looks pretty good. I'm going to click on it. I get to this landing page. It's the order page on Postmates. That lasagna looks really good. So I look through here, and OK, this sounds good. I'm going to order from here. Now, if I switch hats for a second, and I pretend that I am the analyst for Postmates, my boss might ask me something like, what are the top types of food in our top cities? It's a pretty important question to know because you want to know what type of marketing you should be doing for the types of restaurants in each of those different cities. But if I look at this page, it's not giving me many clues. Specifically, if I focus in on that URL at the top there, it says order.postmates.com/Tommaso's Restaurant San Francisco. Now, if I look at a few other pages, I realize not every URL actually has the city name in it. There's no directory structure to let me know a city and a type of food. So if I'm just looking at a pages report, which is a pretty typical place I might start in Google Analytics, I'm not going to get much information from this. I'm not going to be able to answer that really important question that my boss asked me. And this is where the data layer comes in. So I can actually push some information to the data layer from this page. So here I'm adding city is San Francisco, and page subcategory is Italian. I'm going to take these data layer variables, and I'm going to send them to Google Analytics as custom dimensions. And now in my analysis in Google Analytics, I can add a custom dimension of city or of restaurant type to my report, and I can start to easily do that analysis and answer questions about what type of marketing I should be doing in what city. So very, very powerful to add additional data to your site and into your analytics tool, even if your site structure isn't set up for success in that way. OK, our third tip here. analytics goals to track conversion success. Raise your hand if you're using goals in Google Analytics. Wonderful. If you're not, pay attention. Take this home. Do it tomorrow. Goals are very, very powerful in Google Analytics. They help us to get much more out of our analysis. So this is a goal funnel visualization report in Google Analytics. This is for a business that I used to work for, the Google Apps for Business group. It's now called the G Suite group at Google. They sell Google Apps, Docs, Drive to companies. And they have a 3-step sign-up process for a trial for their business. So you can see here we're looking at steps 1, 2, and 3, and that they completed this trial sign-up. Now immediately, what I noticed from this funnel is that from step 1 to step 2, 84% of my users are dropping off. There's a huge drop-off right there. I'm losing a ton of people from step 1 to step 2. As an optimizer, I might think, well, there's probably some things that I can do here. Maybe I can add some content to page 1 of that sign-up flow that will help people understand more about what they're getting into. Maybe it doesn't have enough information there to make them feel comfortable to proceed to step 2. Or maybe I should up-level that content to our marketing site before they even get into this sign-up flow so that they have a better idea once they get in and they'll proceed at a higher rate. So this is a great first indicator of something that might be wrong in areas that we want to look more into. Now this is a custom report in Google Analytics. And here I'm actually looking at a couple things. So down the left-hand side, I'm actually looking at a bunch of tests that I ran. I sent in, via the data layer, actually, some test IDs and test names so that I could get them all in one report like this. And along the top, I'm looking at my analytics goals. And I have set up goals on micro conversions of going from each step, so they made it to step 1 to step 2 to step 3, and macro conversions so that they actually signed up for my trial. Now what I've done here is basically translate that funnel report that we just saw on the last slide to a table report that I'm analyzing across several tests and several variations at the same time. And now I can see if there are certain variations that are driving more flow through in that sign-up funnel. So it's a pretty cool use of goals here. And in particular, this is something that you would have to do in a custom report because in Google Analytics standard reports, you can only have 2 dimensions. So getting a little bit more custom, using those goals, you can get a lot more analysis value. OK, my last tip here in this analysis section. Your site can tell you what's important. So we heard from Talia yesterday that you need to be listening to your customers, and site search is a really, really wonderful way of doing that. This is the actual voice of customer. They're telling you exactly what they want from your website. So the way this works is if you have a search box on your website and customers are coming and they're searching for something, we're capturing that search term if you've enabled site search on your site. So here, again, this is my personal blog. We can see that a lot of people are searching for Google Tag Manager. So they're telling me that they want me to blog more about Google Tag Manager. They want more content from me of Google Tag Manager. So for your businesses, if there's a keyword that keeps coming up, maybe that content is not easily findable on your site. You should consider moving it more front and center, or consider offering more of that type of content or that product or whatever it might be if you see that coming up as a highly ranked term in your search terms report. It's also a really great thing to use in your advertising. If something is coming up as highly requested within site search, it's probably also highly requested in search on Google search or anything else. So if you use that keyword there, then you're targeting those same users throughout the funnel. Heat maps are also a really good way of understanding what your site is telling you. So Google Analytics doesn't actually offer heat mapping. We used to have a tool called in-page analytics. It kind of sucked, so we sunsetted it. But that's OK, because there's a lot of other products out there that do this really well. There's Hotjar. This one's Crazy Egg. I particularly love Crazy Egg because of this report. This is the confetti report. If anybody's familiar with this, what I really like about it is it actually puts a dot on the page for every click, whether or not that was a clickable link. And you can actually break that down and change what those colors of the dots mean. So if I want to know, for example, this is looking at refers, but if I want to know something like time to click, I can do that. I can separate it out with different colored dots. So I can see things on my site that were clicked in less than a second versus things that were clicked in over a minute. And I can start to understand the types of actions that take less interaction time or more interaction time where users might be getting stuck in that manner. A really great example I have of this is before I came to Google, I worked at a higher education company. And we spent a long time building a career portal for our students. We wanted to provide them resources to help build a resume and find a job and those kind of things after they graduated. And so after spending months building this, we launched it. We were really excited. We had email comms and a bunch of marketing to get people to come to the site. And they did. We saw a ton of people coming to this site through Google Analytics. And this site had 3 main calls to action above the fold. That was basically the only 3 things that you could do on this page. And those 3 links were getting almost no interaction. And we were scratching our heads. We're like, well, the site's live. The pages are working. What is going on? Google Analytics says all these people are coming, so what are they doing? We put Crazy Egg on top. And what we found was that people were trying to click on these resources. However, they were trying to click on the images of the resources, which in the development process, we had overlooked making clickable. The only way that you could actually get to those resources was through a tiny little text link underneath the pictures that almost no one saw and no one went to. So that led to a very quick change on our side, and then this page ended up being very, very successful for the company. Okay, now that we've gone through a lot of these different analysis tips, let's put it all together and look at an example analysis. So for this, we are going to pretend that we are all analysts for the Google Merchandise Store. The Google Merchandise Store is an online e-commerce store. It's real. You can buy Google branded gear there, like t-shirts and coffee mugs and that kind of stuff. It's also the site that we use for our demo account. So you can actually go in to the demo account and look at this data yourself and follow along if you'd like. So we're running digital marketing for the Google Merchandise Store. And we want to know a pretty simple question. What is the performance of my paid advertising? Here specifically, we are looking at an AdWords report at our keywords. And we're looking at 2 specific keywords, Google Merchandise and Google Merchandise Store. So we noticed something funny. On mobile, we see that Google Merchandise Store has about half the conversion rate as Google Merchandise. We're scratching our heads and we're like, why is that? These keywords are pretty similar. They're all coming to the site to buy Google branded gear. Why would these be so different? What's causing this? So that's where we come into our hypothesis stage. Now we need to make some assumptions about why this conversion rate might be lower. So one thing I was thinking is that maybe when people are searching for Google Merchandise Store on a mobile device, they're actually looking for a physical store, right? Now, I happen to know that there are only 2 physical stores for the Google Merchandise Store in the world. One is in Mountain View, California, at our headquarters, and the other is in Dublin, Ireland, at our European headquarters. If you're not in one of those 2 places, and you search for Google Merchandise Store thinking you can go to an actual store, you're probably going to be pretty disappointed, and you might not convert online at a higher rate. So what can we do about this? Well, maybe we can try some new messaging on our site. When people who come from Google Merchandise Store as a keyword land, we can tell them that we have a bunch of online-only items to make it seem like it's very exclusive. We can highlight that we have fast shipping. There's certain things that we can do to make this more enticing to those users. So let's try that. Let's try spinning up a few variations and testing it. And that's where we come into our testing phase. So we're going to create a couple of our variations. We're going to set up our goals. In this case, we're tracking e-commerce conversion rate for those keywords, right? We're going to target users on mobile who are coming from one of those 2 keywords. And finally, we're going to go ahead and run this and test it, analyze those results. And that's where we come to the last stage of our framework, which is personalization. So what is personalization? It's wanting to know what personalized experiences should you provide to your customers, and what is the expected benefit of doing so. Now, if you're anything like me, you might hear the word personalization and think, it's an overblown term, you need these fancy tools, it's expensive, I gotta have a data scientist, I gotta have people to do all of this fancy implementation, it's too much work. Well, I'm here to tell you, you're wrong, like Carl did yesterday. I actually think that everybody in this room can start personalizing with the data and the information that you have today. Of course, you can get to that very fancy, far-off place with the tool sets and the data scientist teams and all that. But you don't have to. You can start with what you have. And for that, I actually have a second framework for you. And this I call my personalization maturity framework. It's going to start with mass scale. Now, this is the idea that you can personalize just by understanding who the majority of your customers are. Then we come into specialization. So understanding certain groups and targeting those certain groups. So a certain locale with location-specific content. Next, we're going to look at the referral source. So targeting people based on where they're coming from. And finally, targeting people based on the actions they are taking on your site. All of these are things that you can do without fancy tools. So let's dig in. The first one is mass scale. Okay, I mentioned when I first came to Google, I worked for the Google Apps for Business group, the G Suite group. This was our website when I was working on it. I ran an analytics and optimization program for this group, so I did a lot of testing on this site. And we had this headline that marketing loved. It said, "Discover a better way of working." Marketing loved this headline because they said that we want to sell the message that with Google Apps for Business, Docs, Drive, Gmail, Hangouts, with the holistic suite of tools, we can really promote a better way of working. And engineering said, well, we looked at the data and that's a load of crap. We know that 80% of people that come and sign up for a trial of our business only ever use Gmail. And so let's change that headline. Let's make it something about Gmail. Marketing said, you're wrong. You're engineering, what do you know? But we'll test it. So we did. We spun up a headline test. And we tested marketing's favorite, discover a better way of working, against a few headlines that engineering wrote. You can probably tell, right? Get Gmail for work, 99.9% uptime and 24/7 support. Or marketing's favorite, get email for your domain. Yes. So, of course, marketing's like, oh, none of these are ever going to win. This is laughable. We'll run your test. Don't worry, we're right. So we ran this test for 2 weeks. I happened to be halfway across the world in Australia for an event, and I was going to bed. It was probably midnight my time. And I start getting frantic pings from my VP of marketing. And she was saying, don't you dare launch that headline. And I'm like, uh-oh, what happened? Log into my test. What do I see? Get email for your domain won. Not only did it win, it won by 20%, which was huge for our business. This was one of the biggest wins we had ever seen. At the same time, I'm getting these pings from my VP of marketing telling me my job is pretty much gone if I launch this headline. I'm getting pings from my VP of engineering. And he is saying, you know that server-side testing tool that we built you to run these tests? Well, if you don't launch my winning headline, we're cutting all support for that. I was in between a rock and a hard place in this one. So after a couple hours into my night negotiating between both sides, we came up with a plan. We were going to go ahead and launch this headline to appease engineering, mostly because I wanted to keep my job and keep running tests. And I was going to stay up the rest of the night and create some new test plans and guide my engineering team in terms of what to build to immediately launch a follow-up test to try to get us back to a more marketing-friendly headline. Fast forward a couple weeks later, we actually ended up with a headline that said, "Get Gmail for work," and a subtext that said, "And docs and drive and hang out and everything else to discover a better way of working." So everybody was somewhat happy. Moral of this story: 1, you can personalize your website just by knowing who your audience is. Engineering was right. 80% of our audience just wanted Gmail. And when we changed that headline to focus on Gmail, we saw significant improvement for our business. And lesson 2, make sure that when you are going to spin up a test variation, you have buy-in from all sides so that you don't end up in the situation that I did and lose a full night's of sleep. Okay, specialization. Again, our Google Apps for Business website. This was our US English website. And this was our Japanese website. US English, Japanese. It's the exact same website, it's just translated. We have this problem at Google where we don't actually localize much. We translate. We have one global template for our website, and we just translate it into other languages. And this works for the most part. But has anybody here ever seen a Japanese website? Does it look like this? No. For those of you who have not seen a Japanese website, it is crazy. There are things all over the place. There is so much information thrown at you. For me personally, it's a little overwhelming, but for Japanese people, this is what they expect. It's how they use the internet. It's what they've come to know and love. And so looking at a website like this, it's plain vanilla to them. They're not interested. So we continually were getting this feedback from our Japanese sales team. They're saying nobody's using this website, especially nobody is clicking that gray box in the upper left-hand corner that says contact sales, because that's not how Japanese people do business. Nobody's going to fill out a form online to contact sales. They want to have a nice presentation. They want to have information that they can print out and hand to their superiors and do everything in a very formal way. And so we said, okay, let's test out some of these concepts. So we actually spun up a test that we called our guided flow test. And what this is, in Japanese, is a tool that pops up when you click that contact sales button, which then said guided flow. And it's a multi-step process that walks you through exactly what you need to do during this 30-day trial process and what you need to do to convert from a trial to a paid subscription. And it's printable. And you could print it and hand it out to your boss. This did extremely well. It actually had a 700% increase in clicks on that button, and more importantly, led to an 8% increase in people actually starting the trial process for our Japanese business. This was huge for this business. And we took this a few steps farther. So we actually mocked up what a Japanese version of our website might look like. We even had a nice Tokyo headline. And a year later, after some more testing, that's what we actually launched. It was a much more localized look and feel to our website, and it did extremely well. It was the first time in this group's history that they actually broke the template and they launched a local site, and we saw a huge benefit from that. So that is specialization. It's for personalization at the local level. Now let's look at the referral source. So I'm sure many of you in this room have spent a lot of time building ads over your careers. Now, ads can actually be a huge signal of user intent. If they've clicked on an ad for your business, they're interested in what you have to offer. That message has compelled them to come to your site. So how do you find the right landing page for them? Let's take an example. Let's pretend that we are a shoe company, and we are running a campaign for a summer sale for 18 to 24-year-olds. Now, we have this creative. It's captured their attention. They've clicked it. They're coming to our site. What kind of landing page do we want to offer them? So we could offer them something like this. We have a picture of some young people having fun in the sun, some sunglasses, some shoes, an offer for 15% off. But we might want to test this. We don't know if this is the right landing page for them. Maybe something with emojis is actually going to speak better to this young millennial audience. Who knows? We won't know until we test it. So our last piece of the personalization maturity framework is actions. So to give you an example of this, here we have a website. It's for Light in the Box. It's an online retailer. And you can buy a lot of different things on this website. So here you can see I've come to the site, and I've looked for digital cameras. I've done a lot of research. I may have even added one to my cart, but I haven't bought yet. So if we change our perspective, and again, we're the analyst, now I want to understand what this buying process is like. So here we are in Google Analytics. This is actually Google Analytics 360. It's the custom funnels report. And I'm looking at my website visits. There's a lot of them. A lot of people have come and searched digital cameras. A lot of people have even added to their cart. But very, very few have checked out. Now, what I really love about this report in particular is if I click any one of those downward red arrows, it's going to present me with a pop-up box. And that box is going to say, hey, 2,346 people added a digital camera to their cart but did not check out. Do you want to create a segment and remarket to them? Well, duh, we're all good analysts. Of course we want to remarket to them. We want to bring them back to our site so that they complete this conversion. Not only am I going to hit that button and say yes, I'm going to create an ad with some compelling content so that I can bring them back. Maybe I'll make an offer in that ad for free shipping on their next order. And when they land on my site, I'm going to bring that compelling message with them and have something like this. Welcome back, get free shipping on your next order. And I really like this example because it really brings all of those different things together. So I hope you can see now that you don't need a fancy tool set to actually start personalizing. You can start with what you have today and go through this personalization maturity framework. And as a reminder, this closes out the optimization framework. So thank you very much for having me today.